Okay. So I think we're just going to start. We have all our panelists online, so that's good. So good morning, everyone. My name is Ayan Mohammed. I work for Save the Children as a policy and advocacy manager. So I will be your moderator for this advocacy dialogue series. So today we are discussing reopening of schools, and are we ready, across the country, are we ready, to make sure that children are safe in school. So before I go directly into the topic, I would like to ask all of you to mute your mics and your cameras if you're not speaking. I will ask the panelists to open their cameras and mute their mics, and each panelist will open their mics once they are speaking. Thank you so much. I have put a form in the chat box that you can add your personal information, so we can send you all the documents that we discuss here today in the dialogue. Thank you so much. If you are coming back to our advocacy dialogue series, thank you so much. If you are new today and joining us, welcome. And we organize this advocacy dialogue series every 2 weeks. Each day we discuss a different topic around children's rights and the effect of COVID-19 and beyond. So today I'm really happy to discuss that. I'm really happy to give you the topic of reopening of schools with our panelists. So I would like to go straight to, why are we doing this advocacy dialogue series? So basically, as I said, we create this platform to provide opportunity for key stakeholders to come together and, discuss the policy and programmatic solutions to minimize the impact of COVID-19 on children, and discuss, measures, opportunities, and challenges of school, children's rights, especially today on reopening of schools in Somalia, and how basically we as the education stakeholders coordinate our efforts to ensure children are safe. So today we are discussing, our aim is to bring the attention to the urgent pressing needs for children in the country, across the country, and ask the government to put some concrete measures in place that allows the children to continue their education during COVID-19 pandemic, and also ensure children are the center of the state national efforts. So today, our expert panelists, which I will introduce them shortly, will look at the challenge in education, disruption during this crisis, and also discuss the key measures we need to, keep in mind and take, and also opportunities that we can work together and also work with the parents and teachers and community at large to ensure our children are safe, and also the challenge that are real and happening on the ground on school reopening in the country, and also how best can we coordinate among ourselves and also ensure that the public knows these new protocols and guidelines that we need to ensure we follow to keep children safe in school. So I'm really pleased to bring you today our panelists who are really giving us their time. Thank you so much as our panelists joining us. So I'm giving you Save the Children senior technical specialist in basic education and education in emergencies, Bola Bok. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. I also have Safia Jibril. Safia is the head of education, UNICEF Somaliland. I have Abu Shakur Tarah, who is a researcher and a lecturer at the University of Buckingham. I also have Abdikatir Mohammed Musa, who is also joining us from Garowe. He's a SIDRA, which is a local organization that we work with in education in Puntland, who is a program coordinator. So thank you so much, our panelists, for joining us. We're really grateful for you giving us your time and your expertise in this topic. Anytime if you can't hear me or you see any technical problem, you can put that in the chat box and we'll try to fix that. So now I will go straight to the topic. So I'm giving you Save the Children senior technical specialist in education, Paula Bock, to kind of take us through the overall school reopening strategy of the country and how education stakeholders are, adapting proactive approach to integrate, marginalized and out of school children. Also, how are the safety measures are taken into place, and also how can we focus on remedial education to compensate for the loss of instruction time. So Bola, you have 5 minutes to give us your overview, and then we'll move to the next of the panelists. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Ayan, and thank you everyone for sparing your time to be part of this series. Like Ayan said, I'm called Paul Abok. I'm the Education Technical Specialist for Somalia Country Office. Ayan has given me a very short time, only 5 minutes, and that therefore means I'm going to condense what I have to say. As you are all aware, it's not news that as of March 19, all schools across Somalia were closed down. And the reason for the closure of the schools were really preventive in nature because the government didn't want children to contract the dreaded pandemic, COVID-19. And schools remained closed until around the 15th of last month, the 15th of this month, August, when some states of Somalia opened or reopened their schools, and children started actually coming back to school. But overall, the decision to reopen the schools were actually based on research and studies. One thing we need to appreciate is that it was realized that closing of schools were actually counterproductive, as many children were really not learning. And of course, keeping those schools closed would result into learning outcome actual regression and some socioeconomic ramification on our children and the community. And then further studies also revealed that it was realized that, yes, COVID is dreaded, but then children were really not so much affected by that. And then also reopening of schools and having children in schools would not really actually kind of increase or the spread of the virus. And that was based on actually the global experiences of many countries are reopening up their schools. So that also prompted the government of Somalia and Somaliland to start thinking of reopening up of schools. And what we realized is that all schools in the southern states, Banadir and all those other areas opened from the 15th of August and the 18th of August this year. Then Somaliland schools also all opened up in August of this year. And Puntland, they are in the preparatory stage of reopening their schools. And it's anticipated that the interministerial committee agreed that the schools would definitely be reopened from the 1st of September, inshallah. So that is what has so far happened in terms of reopening up of schools. But also, as we are all aware, we realize the different ministries of education together with the partners develop what they call the COVID response plans, with scenarios factoring in what next if we are reopening schools, what needs to be in place and what has to start. So on the basis of that, the different ministries of education have started putting up measures to prepare the schools actually reopening. So one other key activity that has taken place across, you all are aware that the Ministry of Education, Puntland, Somaliland, and even the southern states came up actually with a schools reopening guideline and schools reopening protocols, which protocols were actually printed and shared with the different organizations, all the schools, the CECs, to actually guide them in the process of reopening up of schools. So these have safety measures and preventive measures that have to be observed before schools have been reopened. So this is one of the strategies that the ministry has actually used. Then also the ministry developed what we call the schools disinfection guides, because it is anticipated that there could have been contamination in the schools during the time the COVID was ravaging the places, because you never know who has visited which school. So there is also need, as a way of prevention, to actually fumigate all the classrooms, all the latrines, all the furniture in the schools. And this is something that the different organizations have contributed to make sure all the schools have been, disinfected or fumigated. And this is to ensure the children are safe when they get back to their schools. Then also, one other area where I appreciate all the organizations work very closely with the Ministry of Education actually to support, to make sure the schools have enough supplies of sanitation kits, hands-free hand washing facilities, liquid soap, detergents, hand sanitizers, and even providing water for the schools, because it is very important that you need to be washing thoroughly and regularly when you're at schools. So I'm happy the different organizations, including Save the Children, have worked so hard to actually make sure the schools have been distributed with the adequate sanitation kits. However, in some other places, we are seeing a bit of a delay in the procurement, but we want to make sure before the middle of September, all schools will have got adequate kits for all their schools. Then also, one thing we also need to appreciate, we shouldn't assume that the community is fully aware of the magnitude and the danger of the COVID. So the Ministry of Education, as part of their school reopening plan, actually is embarking on a back-to-school campaign, door to door, using the different media, using the different community education committees to ensure that every parent, every guardian, every child in the community is sensitized on what COVID is, the danger of COVID, how it is, transmitted, and how one can, prevent that and avoid it. So this is a program which is actually going on using the different media and different approaches to reach every breadth and length of our community where children are drawn from. Then even teachers are being mobilized, teachers are being sensitized, the parents are being sensitized, so that they're really aware, because they are, at the end of the day, they're going to interact and work with the children when they're at school. So it's important, and this is something that is going to happen. But also one thing we've realized, there is that aspect of social distancing. And then we all aware in some of our schools, especially in the towns, the urban centers, the classes are really congested. And with the COVID, you have to maintain that distance of 2 meters plus or 1 meter plus. And when you look at our classrooms, you realize we have in some schools inadequate space, and that has always led to overcrowding. So what is happening, Save the Children together with the other partners are working closely with the Ministry of Education through the different COVID response programs to make sure additional space in terms of learning spaces, classrooms, latrines are put up in the schools, so that the schools and the classes are actually, decongested. Although this still remains kind of a challenge, because it requires also additional funding. And that is something that we are working hard towards, coordinating with the different agencies and then working closely with the government. But also one thing we've realized during the lockdown, when schools were closed, not all children actually had the opportunity to access the online lessons. Not all of them had the opportunity to listen to the radios, especially those children that are living in the rural communities. And now as the schools reopen, for us this is an opportunity actually to start looking at continuation of these online lessons. We are not going, the ministry as agreed is not going to stop at that. It will continue, but also within the schools, we are looking at having an opportunity of having additional remedial classes for the time lost. So this is something that Save the Children has already started doing with the other organizations, but of course, a lot more really needs to be done in this case. One other challenge that we are seeing, yes, there is still overcrowding, and this is something that needs to be done. Efforts need to be put up here so that more space is created. Teachers now have to teach fewer children in well-spaced classrooms, but that also has now the effect on the teachers themselves, because if you are breaking a class, the usual class now has to be broken maybe into 2 or 3 classes, and the teacher has to teach all those. So it becomes a lot of workload for the teachers. And this is something that we're still grappling with and working together with the ministry, with the UNICEF, and then with the other partners to see how best this can be done. So in brief, this so far what actually the Ministry of Education together with the different stakeholders and organizations have started doing to ensure that there is a safe return of children in the schools when the schools are reopened. Thank you, Ayan.
Thank you so much, Bo. I hope you are able to hear me well.
Yes.
So before I go to the next panelist, there's a question in the chat box from Abdurrahman, a follow-up question. It says, what are the main contents of school disinfection guidelines and who has developed it? It's the questions in the chat box, and Somaliland Ministry of Education or the federal government. Will you address that question?
Yeah, I think this infection guideline was developed together with the Ministry of Education and then the different sectors, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and then the other partners. Because what do we mean, first of all, disinfection, okay? Of course, the guideline is there. We'll share, if you've not yet got that, the content of that, how it's supposed to be done, and then the person doing it, the training, the preparations, and all that. But this is not something of an NGO. It was actually developed together by the Interministerial Committee, the clusters, and then the education partners, that all schools should actually do disinfection, and there is a package that is required for that to happen. I must confess at the moment, of course, not all schools have so far been disinfected, especially the rural schools for those states that have already been opened. They are beginning actually with the schools that are more congested as they also go out. But there is that guideline, there is the sprayer and all that, the chemicals, and then the precautions that have to be taken, the time duration. So it is not a Save the Children's guideline, but it is developed by all the partners, approved and discussed.
Thank you so much, Bo. Thank you. I think there's more questions coming, but I will give you one more question. Abdul Shakur, who's also our panelist, is asking, you mentioned teachers' workload. Can you explain this bit more? And also another one is follow-up question. Do you mean they have to adjust the delivery of a curriculum according to the children's needs? So basically, it's around children's teachers' workload.
Thank you. You know, when we are talking of the teachers' workload, let us look at it from the point of decongestion of the classrooms to maintain social distancing. If a normal class used to be or having maybe 40 or 45 learners, okay? But now we are saying we want to maintain that social distance so that children do not sit very close to each other. That therefore means you are going to reduce the number of learners in a classroom in order to meet the requirement of the social distancing. And if you do that, what about the other learners that you will have put out of the class or put them in another space? That therefore means the teacher is delivering a content, and this same content has to be delivered to these learners whose numbers have been reduced, but also the same teacher has to go and follow the other learners in maybe the next class because they have also been, decongested to teach. So you can realize if a class used to have maybe 50 or 60 learners, this time you are going to split in maybe 20, 20, 20. And that is a multiplication of workload for that particular teacher who has to deliver a lesson in a day, okay? So that is something that has to happen. And it goes hand in hand also with the learning spaces, because that would definitely require that you need more classrooms to accommodate the extra number of learners that you are reduced from this particular classroom. So that is what is happening, and the Ministry of Education, UNICEF, together with the other partners, are discussing to see how best this can be supported. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much, Paul. I think there's a lot of questions coming, but I will keep that in the end of the dialogue. So now I'm going to invite my next panelist, Safia Jibril from UNICEF, Head of Education Somaliland. So Safia, my question to you is, around the availability of safe delivery of essential services, including, critical nutrition, wash, health services, school feeding, mental health and psychosocial support, and basically training administration staff and teachers on implementing those safety guidelines. Welcome, Sophia. Hello, Sophia, can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, I'm just struggling with the technology. Sorry.
Sorry.
Do I have to open the camera?
Yeah, we can see you very well. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Good morning to you all, colleagues, and thank you for inviting us to be part of this valuable discussion. I'm Safia Abdi. I'm from UNICEF. At the same time, I'm the co-chair of education sector as the education sector representative. In about the resources availability of resources and the training is in school reopening, and if I start with the introduction of school reopening guidelines in Somaliland, and it was a collective effort from all education partners with the leadership of Ministry of Education. And before the school reopening started, there was a lot of preparations within education sector, and roadmap has been developed. And in that roadmap, it has been mentioned and outlined the required services when the schools reopen. It has been also talking about the protection. It has been talking about the services available for COVID-19 preventive measures, and all that guidelines and the requirement of the services and who is doing what and where has been discussed within education partners. And it was also discussed and the roles and the responsibility and who is going to provide such kind of services. So as education partners, particularly I'm talking in Somaliland, education partners together, they had a serious coordination meetings and ad hoc meetings discussing about how these resources or the services to be addressed. And the issue of the main important critical services required for the school reopening was schools washing, cleaning, and before the children come in, and who is going to take care of some parts of the schools. So all the schools has been mapped out, and we come up with around 1,200 primary schools is estimated, but 80% of that primary schools are public schools, and secondary, public and private, secondary and primary. It was around 80% are public schools. And of course, public schools, they need more resources than the private schools, as far as private schools as taken care by the owners. So the focus become to the public schools, which is around 80% of the country of in facilities. And it has education partners, they harmonized the resources available at that time. And they also mapped out who is doing what and how many schools each organization is supporting to provide that required services. And the required services mainly was wash facilities, water supply itself, COVID-19 preventive measures items like sanitizers, masks, and golfs, and cleaning in consumable items. At the same time, school feeding. In the other way, there should be a awareness raising of the staff, government staff, I mean teaching staff and non-teaching staff, and anyone who is involved in the school and contacting the children. Am I off?
Yeah, we can hear you very well.
All right.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Then it has been mapped out. So organization is, with the help of Ministry of Education, come together, and at least they have presented the area that each organization is supporting. So in the total of the public schools, it's around 900, apart from the when we deduct from the exclude from private, it's around 900 schools, both secondary and primary, come up. And organization is at least they have already selected and responded in confirmed to support around 815 schools across the education partners. Of that 850 schools, the gap was around 90% of the public schools. The services, that's the gap of the lacking the services required. But at least in 85, I could say 85 schools, at least the services required for the prevention of COVID-19 is already addressed and is ongoing. Of course, there will be a gap, but at least some essential required services is ongoing. Wash facilities is almost all that target schools is almost provided. And at the same time, the other preventive measures on items and consumable items provided. WFB is continue feeding the children, the schools that they used to support. And the other organization is also provided some school meals because of the COVID-19 response. And at the same time, in the training of the education in staff. Minister of the, CECs, community education committees, teachers themselves. There was a big training that has been conducted in Ministry of Education in the summertime before the schools reopen. So in that teachers training, it was the regular training, but it has incorporated some awareness training when the teachers go back to the schools to pass that message related of COVID-19 preventive measures, and at the same time, psychosocial, child protection issue, all that has been incorporated during the training. So around 700 teachers and head teachers now equipped to go back when they go to open to the school to pass the message to the students. In parallel, there is ongoing on-job training and awareness directly to the schools at the moment. Ministry of Education also at the regional and the district level, they are also observing and monitoring how the school reopening is taking place, and they are monitoring, and the monitoring is ongoing. However, still there is a gap and the challenges in social distance is not as required. Particularly schools in the public in a major towns, buses are still collecting many children, and at the same time in particularly private schools, and the classrooms is still social distance is not as required. But most of the schools now they are addressing all the guidelines that has been said. So and all of them they are applying the guidelines. COVID-19 response guidelines has been developed by the Ministry of Education with the support of education sector, and that guidelines there are 10 guidelines, 10 points has been approved by the national COVID-19 Committee of Somaliland, and all the schools are making sure that the information is reached of that guidelines. It has been printed flyers. It has been printed in the guidelines itself, directives, they call directives. All that 10 points of directives is being printed and disseminated to the schools. Although I cannot say that 100% schools has been received it, but the plan is that, and it's ongoing. Some are already printed out, and some are all still under printing, and it will be disseminated. So that's from my side. I don't know if I left something. Maybe I will clarify in the question. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sophia. I think that was really comprehensive, presentation. Give us overview of, what's happening, availability of their essential services in schools. I will go to my next panelist. My next panelist is joining us from UK. That's Abshakur Tara. He's a researcher and a lecturer and a big advocate of education. He's also a lecturer at the University of Buckingham. So Abshakur, welcome, and thank you so much for accepting, to be part of this Advocacy Dialogue Series. My question to you is, how can we address the learning inequalities and address, protection concerns, exacerbated by COVID-19, school closures, particularly for girls and other marginalized groups? How can we, learn from this, pandemic, and how can we ensure to minimize these inequalities? What can be done? Welcome, Abshakur. We can't hear you. You are on mute.
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me now. Yeah. Everyone,
very well. I can hear you.
Good morning from the UK, from Leicester, Premier League champion 2015. I'm not sure whether Paul and others followed the Premier League champion. Leicester won 2015. Yeah, excellent. I'm really very pleased, and I thank you very much, Ayan, for inviting me, and also thanks to Save the Children. I thoroughly enjoyed the number of occasions that I had the opportunity to watch live of your dialogue discussions, which was very enlightening, and I have to say that it has really changed quite significantly in terms of my interest of areas around advocacy in countries where the conflict is very imminent, or sometimes really post-conflict. And I really been touched by the story about Hawa. Was it Hawa or Halima, the one you've interviewed from Somalia? She was one of the girls that's been affected by this COVID-19. And I'm even if I didn't watch most of your videos, I do watch through YouTube to catch up them. And I think it's really important that we actually maintain this level of advocacy for those children who are marginalized, but also disaffected by any other issues. Of course, COVID-19 has been a significant impact on many lives, including children, but also others who actually involved in education, including teachers. And I'm very pleased to hear from Sophia, but also Paul, around what is already happening. We have to bear in mind the learning inequality did exist before COVID-19. It did exist in high proportion, particularly girls, who are actually underrepresented in many education settings, but also schools. And I think we need to be mindful whether those inequalities, injustices still continue during the pandemic, but also post-COVID-19. And I think my understanding in some other contexts globally, but I also have to mention here in the UK, which as you probably know, sixth economy in the world, these inequalities do exist and did exist before COVID-19. I'm not in any way comparing what's happening here with the rest in other countries, particularly poor countries. As a lecturer of comparative education, it has been always my philosophy not to compare countries because they have different resources, they have different strategies, and they have different policies and practice. But I just want to highlight a couple of things which I just picked up from Paul in terms of preparing schools to reopen. When it comes to reopening schools, we are not only talking about physical reopening of schools, we also need to be mindful about the whole philosophical, psychological, but also the emotional opening for these children, because they've been out of school for quite significant time and coming back to school in a way that will never be the same. The education will never be the same. We will remain, at least foreseeable period, that the change that happened during the lockdown will have a significant impact on the way that actually we deliver education. I just want to share, colleagues, here, example of what happened in the UK during the pandemic. 57% of the children from disadvantaged background, and we call it here disadvantaged background, children who have actually socioeconomically disadvantaged, but also ethnic minority quite significantly represented in that cohort, did not actually have a full education. Even some of them have barriers to education, particularly lack of access to technology, lack of access to computers, internet. These are the kind of inequality to learning that actually some children have experienced it in countries where there's sixth economy in the world. Let alone countries that have limited resources might also have a very significant impact on that. We also need to remember, as colleagues, inequality in education did exist before the COVID-19, as I said earlier, and it exists in a way that sometimes we underestimate what's happening in learning in the schools. We also need to remember, although children were accessing to education, where they're going to schools, but in terms of the actual accessing good quality education has always been problematic, and particularly countries like sub-Saharan Africa, where there is the level of engagement with teachers is quite, it's something that research has found significantly poorer. We know countries like Somalia, where there is a significant number of non-state actor players. It's quite significant to remember going for them to reopen, and I had the opportunity yesterday to be on the phone with a number of private school managers. They quite raise a significant concern in terms of children accessing all the necessary personal protective equipment, but also other hygiene and you know things like hand wash and so forth. I think Paul has already covered that. I don't want to go back, but one of the things I want to highlight here is, and I asked that question earlier to Paul, going back to school after that lockdown, the curriculum should not be the same, and that's why there's something called recovery curriculum. The recovery curriculum is actually it's a flexible method of delivery curriculum where you actually combine the emotional support, the pastoral element, the coaching, you know, bringing the low self-esteem up to the standard that need the child to succeed in learning. These are the key elements. And I just want to highlight a couple of things that I come across just yesterday through my school that I was involved. And one of the things they highlighted is looking at children missed quite a lot in its education. Education is not only learning maths and English and other subjects. It's about building the interpersonal relationship with the peers, with the children among themselves. The first thing the teacher should actually make sure that is spending more time of actually making the child recover from that emotional detachment with these children, but also making sure that those children do access the relevant support of moral support. You know, Hawa or Halima talked about, sorry, Salma talked about when I was watching you, Ayan, the session you were moderating. One of the things she said, low self-esteem. The children who were disengaged with learning before and having a gap of learning for a few months, that has actually resulted the drop of self-esteem. And that is one of the things that needs to be actually make sure that opens. The other thing that I want to highlight is understanding the individual children's needs. We remember we have children who sometimes might not have a full access to the curriculum, who always have that additional needs. We call it here special educational needs, and countries like Kenya, they call it special needs education. These children are the most vulnerable, and they need to be really supported, building those curriculum, what we call it broad and balanced curriculum. The other thing I would also like to highlight is improving the knowledge within this teaching. And that's why I was very pleased to hear Sophia talking about teacher training, on-job training, to make sure that the current system of curriculum is actually meeting the needs of the children. It has to be holistic, it has to be inclusive, and it actually must be a teacher that can actually deliver that. I'm not sure how much time I got. I know you've been generous to the other panelists, and I'm sure, Ayan, you will remain the same. But all the point I want to conclude that is recovery curriculum is most important things. We also need to understand the needs of these children. These children have been away. We remember there are a few percentage of children in Somalia do attend education. There are children outside who are absolutely had no access to education. You know, have some sort of community input as well. You know, engaging the stakeholders. The school is a community setting, and actually reaching out the community is something I would urge our you know, colleagues who probably have the chance to listen, but also others who might not actually who might listen that otherwise. So I've actually used a stopwatch. You know, I always do that, and I'm going to stop here. It's 9 minutes and 31 seconds. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think that was really a good way of putting, you know, how can we minimize the inequalities and the impact of school closure had on children. Our last Advocacy Dialogue Series that we hosted, I think it was 3 weeks, I think it was the 4th one of our Advocacy Dialogue Series a few months back. We focused on education, and we had children coming and speaking to us about, you know, their concerns and how the school closure is impacting their lives, and how, you know, some of the young girls we invited talked about, you know, child marriage and FGM and all these, you know, protection concerns that's, you know, impacting their lives, and that's what Abdulsar was referring, and I think, you know, that we need to really do more to ensure that children in school are now, you know, are protected more than ever, and those inequalities are really addressed and looked in a different angle. So thank you so much, Abdulsaq. So I would like to invite someone from the participants. I think Hadia Ali, she's a parent, and she's also an education advocate. She has a question to ask to the panelists, so we are always welcome the, you know, concerning parents asking questions for their children. So welcome, Hadia. So Ashad with you.
Thank you. So, I hope everyone is safe from COVID-19. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you very well.
Can hear you. Okay, thank you. I hope everyone is safe from COVID-19. My name is Hadia. I'm an educational activist. My question is that how can we ensure to get quality education in spite of inequality that we are facing, at least those who are in a schools and teachers who are giving, how can we get a quality education only for those who are having? So in order to minimize those inequality, to get quality education, and despite of this, I definitely agree with Abdi Shakur. He's only focusing, he was focusing in different inequalities that we are facing. My brothers were in schools, but when March schools were off, they could not have access of internet because they don't have an internet at home. They don't have access to computers. They were using my phone, but all of I have 7 brothers, and then they couldn't get all the quality education that they can get from the internet. So there are a lot of things that we are facing, problems in education, but at least those who are on access, how can they get a quality education? How can teachers be perfect teachers that are willing what they are giving and teaching them what they are teaching? So we can get at least, I believe if we get the quality education that we needed, maybe we'll end these inequalities and all these problems that teenagers are facing day after day. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Hadia. I think that was really a really good question. We really appreciate you coming and talking to us. So, Abshakur, just to summarize what Hadia said is around how can we ensure, you know, delivering a quality education in those marginalized, you know, children, and how can we ensure access and the quality at the same time, and also, you know, working with teachers, how can we ensure that the flexible curriculum that you just talked about, how can we, implement that in the country? Welcome.
Thank you, Hadi. That was really good question, Walal. The point of good quality education is really paramount in many discussions globally. We know that it doesn't only concern about the COVID-19. And one of the things we always say, if you want to achieve a fully access good quality education, particularly to a marginalized community, you have to have something, we call it equality law. You cannot achieve 100% equality access to good quality education without having no equality law. That's quite very difficult in many countries. But my suggestion is always looking at where those marginalized children attend. And I mentioned to you, Ayan, before, my current research is on looking at the quality education in low-cost private schools, where majority of those children in the poorer communities do not have access, even those public schools particularly, either because of the distance, the geographical barrier, or might be because of the perception of the parents in terms of quality. So the most important thing is changing our attitude, particularly the professionals, the teachers, to make sure the children are giving up. I was really heart-touched last night when you sent me that picture, a child walking on the walls, on the just tiny, very tiny pavement against the wall to go to school because the roads were very, wet and muddy. These are the kind of things that we have to bear in mind, that kind of a strong leadership, teacher, attitude, integrity, to make sure that the children who are really giving up their livelihood, part of it, particularly those parents, children attending low-cost private schools, must make sure teachers understand the reason why those children are there, to access good quality education. But also the policymakers, but also the wider stakeholders must also hold those schools to account by actually improving the standards, but also teacher training. Safia talked about, and I'm really keen to know what type of on-job training that she talked about for the teachers, because it's not only about pandemic and the COVID-19, it's about what happened after that. We need a complete change of education that actually meets the needs of children in post-COVID-19. I hope I answered to your question, Huda.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Abdul, for answering that. I think my second question is to Sophia, actually, is how can we education authorities strengthen communication and coordination mechanisms to promote dialogue at the community level. How can we engage with communities, parents, and children themselves to ensure that these safety measures are counted and taken into place? Sophia, welcome.
Thank you. And if I just talk in a Somaliland context and the education sector in general, I think that coordination and communication of education sector is more advanced, and where with the leadership of Ministry of Education, all education partners come together and meet monthly, and they have education sector working in forum, and they plan together, and also they organize. I mean, they harmonize the resources available, and they know each other who is doing what and where, and to avoid overlapping. In that case, it is very easy that partners engage. Minister of Education is a part of the education partners. We are in the same page to go together, but reaching to the community is reaching through Minister of Education, because Minister of Education in Somaliland, they have a very intact structure and an administrative structure that reaches up to the district level, up to the school level. There's a district regional education officers, and there are also district education officers. And at the same time, each district education officer is responsible for satellite schools, villages, number of satellite villages. So if that villages in each school level there is community education committee who has been normally mapped out and been trained by education partners and Ministry of Education itself. There is also a manual, a standard manual guideline that in a school education committee is being trained. So that is the kind of structure is easy to reach the CECs and administrative authority. And when it comes to the harmonization and coordination, I could say that education sector coordination is very, very, very intact and very advanced. And their communication is on both ways. So if anything comes within education sector, it's easily known and shared, and anything arises within that. So I think the strength is already there, but it needs a lot of, it needs more strength to involve the community and the government in authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. My next question goes to Paul. So Shamila is asking, the COVID-19 pandemic has destroyed families' livelihood and income. This will make it, difficult for families to support their children and to go back to school, to go back to learning, paying school fees, etc. What can the government and donors do to support the most vulnerable families? Welcome, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Ayan. Like Jamila said, as you know, the family is one of the strong pillars of a quality education and access for children. And that is the first line of duty for children to get educated. But in the event that the capacity of the family and the community to fend for the children, to support children's education is compromised, then definitely children end up getting abused, children end up having to support the family to survive. And in this case, as education, we work with other sectors, and that becomes very important. We integrate, we coordinate our activities. What is happening, we've been, as education, actually working and integrating with the livelihood sector to make sure that families and communities are empowered. One such areas is like supporting them through cash programming so that they are empowered, they are able to support their children in their education processes. Because what, of course, we need to know is that resources are ever limited. The donors do not have adequate resources. The government do not have adequate resources. But we are saying, one, it's a point of advocacy as well, that even when you want to support the education of the children, make sure the parents, first of all, are empowered through livelihood opportunities and activities so that they're able to support their children to school. Because you cannot rely maybe on support from the donors, maybe providing only food for the children at home. There are a lot of things that children do require from home before they come to school. So for me, that is one key approach that I would want the education people to work, to actually link, integrate with the other sectors and ensure that the parents and the community are economically empowered through support from the government, through support from the donors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think I have not received any more questions from the public or the participants, so this will mean we ended the dialogue here. But before I ended the dialogue, I want to ask all the three panelists, to kind of give us one or two of the recommendations they are giving us in closing the dialogue. So I welcome Abdul Saab, then I will give Paul, and then Sophia, then we close the dialogue. Shakur, welcome.
Yeah, you called me Abdul Razak. I was wondering who was
Sorry. Oh my God, so
right,
sorry.
okay. No worries, no worries. People always mistake with Abdul Rashid, Abdul Shakur. Thank you, Ayan. And I think one of the things I missed actually, safeguarding child protection. You know, children are more safer going to school, but if that setting, it actually accommodates the needs, the welfare and the well-being of those children. I think safeguarding is paramount. We heard that there is some sort of the child abuse and domestic abuse has rocketed during the pandemic. We know, and that's one of the reasons I recommend emotional support, you know, pastoral element, the recovery of the curriculum based on the children's needs, both welfare, the well-being, and also their emotional attachment is quite very crucial. And I think one of the things I would like to recommend, to suggest is also community input must be actually taken into account by engaging the wider context in terms of meeting those needs, the children's needs in terms of protection and feeling safe in those schools.
Hello, Sophia, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm hearing you well.
Okay.
So can I just maybe take a recommendation from what has been discussed, like Abdulrazak comments? Can I make on that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Abdulrazak, yes, am I
Abdul
correct, Abdulrazak? Yes.
Yeah.
Abdulrazak, you have clearly said that the out-of-school children. So let me just take an opportunity to talk about the out-of-school children in Somaliland. According to the Education Management Information System, recently has been conducted with the support of UNICEF and Save the Children. The children in Somaliland, children in the school are only 29%. That means 71 is out of the school. Those who we are talking now is only 29%. And most of the children who are excluded in the schools, mainly they are from rural areas, nomad, urban poor, and the IDBs. And they are already excluded of that. So if we need to accommodate all the children, we are talking about quality. Quality is fine. We have to improve the quality, those who are already in these schools. But those who are already out of the school, from UNICEF side, we have piloted a program. In fact, most of the education partners, they use that one, alternative basic education program. That program is a condensed program that can accommodate many out of school children. And the good thing is not only a short time that they are finishing in the primary schools, it's also accommodating the children who are busy in the morning. If they come to school to the afternoon, particularly those who are engaged in animal rearing and farming, mostly the excluded ones are those they give a chance in the afternoon. They have time to come to the school in the afternoon, and at the same time, that curriculum is another opportunity as far as they are grown-ups over the age, and it's around 10 years above. So it's giving chance that children to complete their education in 5 years, which is a regular, normal, same competency of the primary education curriculum, and at the same time, the timing itself is also another opportunity accommodating out of school children. It's one of the strategies we are thinking. We have already tried as education partners. I think Save the Children also tried. UNICEF, we are also engaged on that. And in the rural areas, the same school. If you will find a school in a community, in the morning you will find maybe 10 students there. If you count the households, you will find 200 households live in that settlement, but only 10 or 20 students coming to the school. The problem is they don't have time. So the life of the school is not matching the life of the community. So schools should be in address the community lifestyle. So it has already been experimented. If we provide alternative based education and the timing is suitable for the community in the afternoon, I think that we can accommodate many children out of school children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Engineer Mohammed, can you please turn off your cameras? Thank you so much. So Sophia, you can share with us the research on out of school children. You can send me, then I can share widely with the participants.
Correction. There's no research. I'm talking about IMIS, what we call Education Management Information System, that we support Ministry of Education annually. That's the information Ministry of Education collects. So every year it's a school census. So as far as we have 257,000 in the schools, according to the population age of Somaliland, of school age population of Somaliland is around 800,000. That's where we came from. The calculation is the denominator we used, it was the 800. If you have in the school is 257,000 and school age children, according to the population census of WFP 2014, Somaliland school age population is around 850. How much is missing? That's where the data is come from.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophia. Now we understand. So I'll give Paul, and then we close the dialogue. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Ayan. Thank you, Abdishakuru. Thank you, Sophia. I think for me, I have quite a number of recommendations. One, children, now that schools have been reopened, children are coming from home into the schools. So my recommendation is that we need to have a very strong linkage between the community and the school, because it is one thing for the schools to be safe children, and also another thing for the community to do that. So there is need, much as we also support the schools to ensure children are safe, we also need to continue supporting the community and parents to make sure they speak the same language in schools. Then two, schools have been closed for so many months. And my appeal actually to the Ministry of Education, especially the Quality Assurance Department, this is the time to make sure they do thorough and regular monitoring of the schools to support the teachers, to support the head teachers, to support the CECs, and also to support the children from schools. Because a lot of things could be happening in the schools, and this is where the Ministry of Education really needs to come. Then also we need to focus on equity. Mark, you during the 4 or 5 months when schools have been closed, yes, the respective ministries of education have been, providing content online to learners. But we need to appreciate that, for me, the bulk of the children are in the rural communities, the IDPs, and then the children who are in the rural areas. And those children did not really have enough of that opportunity to attend to the lessons. Now that schools have been reopened, if we are talking of equity, we need to provide enough focus to those disadvantaged and rural children, much as we also do the same for children in the urban setting. Otherwise, the big chunk of the children will end up missing on the valuable bit of the education. Then also for teachers, lastly, whereas children have been affected during the COVID pandemic period, the same has also happened to teachers. Teachers have been affected. Many teachers underwent a lot of psychosocial trauma because of that. So teachers can be in class, but we also need to see how to address their psychosocial needs. So when we are talking of training of teachers, providing continuous professional development for teachers, we should be mindful to look at the social-emotional learning of children, but also the social-emotional well-being of the teachers themselves. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much, Abshakur, and thank you so much, Sophia, for joining us for this. I think this was really, really important area that we needed to discuss and talk about, and also discuss how can we keep our children safe while in school. Thank you so much, and I think this is the end of our Advocacy Dialogue Series on reopening of schools. Until next time, we come together on such a topic. I think my education expert panelists join me again. I think this will be the end, and thank you so much and have a great day. You can always watch the recording from our YouTube channel, Save the Children Somalia, and then you will have the recording. I think it's uploaded within the next 2 days. Thank you so much and have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Ayan. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Colleagues.